The last defensive shield flickered like a dying ember against the obsidian darkness of space. Commander Valeria Ross watched the holographic displays with a mixture of exhaustion and defiance, her fingers tracing the intricate network of remaining defensive positions on the colony's perimeter. Epsilon 9 had been more than just a strategic outpost. It was the final bastion of hope for 3 interconnected species facing total extinction. Dust from continuous bombardments coated the command center's viewports, casting a gray film over the once pristine observation deck. The colony's metallic infrastructure groaned under sustained stress, support beams buckling and emergency repair systems working overtime to maintain even the most basic life support. Outside, the void seemed alive with malevolent movement. Countless biomechanical constructs of the swarm pressed against their final defensive line. Quantum communication array is at 12% capacity, reported Lieutenant Kai Chen, his voice hoarse from days without proper rest. We might get 1, maybe 2, transmission bursts before complete system failure. The young officer's hands moved with practiced precision, routing the last fragments of their communication power into a single desperate message. The swarm had been methodical in their destruction. Planet after planet had fallen, civilizations erased with clinical efficiency. They were more than just an invading force. They were a systematic elimination protocol, consuming technological and biological resources with terrifying precision. Every defense had crumbled. Every strategy had failed. Valeria remembered the initial reports from the frontier colonies. Strange signals, unexplained system failures, entire research stations going dark overnight. No one had understood the true nature of the threat until it was too late. The swarm didn't just attack. They absorbed, integrated, and transformed everything in their path. Her personal datapad chirped with a final diagnostic report. Power systems were collapsing, defensive networks were fragmenting, and the colony's massive fusion generators were just moments from total shutdown. They had fought for 287 standard cycles, longer than any previous civilization had survived against the swarm. But survival was no longer an option. Transmission ready, Kai announced, his fingers hovering over the quantum communication interface, routing maximum compression using deep space archetypal communication protocols. The command center trembled. Another section of the outer hull had given way, emergency force fields struggling to maintain atmospheric integrity. Rescue was impossible. Escape was a fantasy. All that remained was to ensure their final message might, just might, reach someone who could understand the true nature of the threat. Valeria placed her hand on Kai's shoulder. Send it all. Every scrap of data, every analysis, every fragment of our research on the swarm. Make sure it's encoded in multiple quantum frequencies. If anyone receives this, they need to understand what we've learned. The transmission began, a compressed burst of information that represented the collective knowledge of 3 species. Technical specifications, behavioral patterns, weapon signatures, biological analysis, centuries of research compressed into a single desperate communication. It was more than a distress signal. It was a warning, a final testament to civilizations that might still have a chance. Outside, the swarm's biomechanical constructs began to breach the final defensive perimeter. Massive tentacle-like appendages made of merged technological and organic matter started to tear through the colony's outer structures. Each breach was a calculated invasion, not a random attack. Transmission at 64% completion, Kai reported, his voice surprisingly calm. Quantum entanglement protocols are holding. Valeria watched the holographic displays, seeing the last defensive positions collapse one by one. The swarm was methodical, intelligently adapting to every defensive configuration. They didn't just overwhelm. They learned, they adjusted, they transformed. In the final moments, as emergency systems began catastrophic shutdown sequences, Commander Valeria Ross allowed herself a slight smile. Whatever happened to Epsilon 9, whatever destruction the swarm would unleash, their knowledge would survive. Their final message would travel through the vast, cold darkness of space, a beacon of warning and potential survival. The transmission completed. The colony's systems went dark. Silence consumed everything. The Galactic Diplomatic Archives occupied a massive subterranean complex beneath New Geneva, a sprawling underground facility that housed centuries of interstellar communication records. Most considered it a museum, a repository of forgotten treaties and obsolete diplomatic channels. Fluorescent light strips cast a sterile glow across endless rows of quantum data crystals, each containing fragments of galactic history. Dr. Marcus Chen sat hunched over an antiquated data parsing station, his fingers moving with a musicality that belied the tedious nature of his work. Junior xenohistorians were rarely assigned to anything more exciting than cross-referencing centuries-old communication logs. Most of his colleagues viewed the archives as a career purgatory, a place where ambitious careers came to quietly expire. The communication fragment had arrived 3 standard weeks ago, buried in a routine data sweep that most would have dismissed as technological noise. But something about the transmission's quantum signature nagged at Marcus. He had developed a reputation among his peers for being obsessively detail-oriented, a trait that made him both respected and slightly feared in academic circles. System anomaly detected. The parsing algorithm chirped softly, its holographic interface flickering with an unusual pattern of quantum entanglement markers. Marcus leaned closer, adjusting the spectral analysis filters. What appeared to be random communication noise was actually a highly compressed data packet, something far more sophisticated than standard distress signals. He pulled up the historical cross-reference database, his fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. The transmission contained markers that matched diplomatic protocols from nearly 3 centuries ago, a time when humanity was considered a fringe civilization, barely capable of interplanetary communication. Most galactic records from that era treated human diplomatic efforts as quaint curiosities at best. A notification pinged. The communications core signature contained embedded reference codes that matched a series of long-forgotten mutual defense treaties. Marcus remembered lectures from his doctoral program, discussions about humanity's early attempts to establish interstellar diplomatic connections. Most scholars had dismissed these as naive political experiments, diplomatic fantasy born from human overambition. But the codes were real, and they predated the current galactic political structure by nearly 2 centuries. Marcus began a deeper analysis, running quantum decryption protocols that would make most standard communication systems appear primitive. Layer after layer of compressed information revealed itself: technical specifications, astronomical coordinates, biological threat assessments. This was no simple distress signal. This was a comprehensive threat documentation package. His research terminal began to overheat, quantum processors struggling to parse the complex data streams. The communications origin point was a colony designation that no longer existed in current star charts. Epsilon 9, a name that triggered something deep in Marcus's historical memory. A notification from the central archival system interrupted his concentration. Threat level assessment required. Quantum communication anomaly detected. Bureaucratic protocol demanded a full review, a process that could take months or even years in the labyrinthine diplomatic systems. Marcus knew he had discovered something extraordinary. The transmission contained not just a cry for help, but a comprehensive analysis of a threat that could potentially destabilize entire galactic political structures. The swarm, a term embedded deep within the communications encrypted layers, represented something far more dangerous than current xenobiological threat assessments suggested. He began preparing a preliminary report, knowing full well that most of his superiors would dismiss his findings. Junior researchers were not typically the ones who uncovered potential galactic-scale threats. The diplomatic archives were supposed to be a place of historical preservation, not active threat detection. As quantum processors continued their relentless decryption, Marcus realized the transmission contained something even more remarkable. Hidden within layers of compressed data were technical specifications that suggested a level of technological understanding far beyond current galactic standards. Someone, or something, had prepared an incredibly sophisticated communication package designed to survive across potentially centuries of transmission. The final decryption sequence completed. A holographic representation of the original transmission crystallized before Marcus's eyes, a complex, three-dimensional representation of astronomical data, biological threat assessments, and technological specifications that seemed to defy conventional understanding. Something was coming, and humanity might be the only civilization prepared to understand its true nature. Beneath the roiling storms of Jupiter, the quantum-forged shipyards existed as humanity's most closely guarded secret. Massive electromagnetic interference created a natural shield that made traditional detection impossible, while quantum-dampening technologies ensured that no external scanning could penetrate the facility's true nature. Admiral Elena Rodriguez stood on the central observation deck, watching as the latest generation of adaptive warships took shape. These were not mere vessels. They were living technological organisms that challenged every conventional understanding of space engineering. Each ship represented decades of covert research, a culmination of humanity's most advanced scientific and technological achievements. The shipyards operated on a principle far beyond traditional manufacturing. Nano-adaptive construction units worked in perfect synchronization, drawing raw materials from specially processed asteroids and quantum-harvested energy sources. Ships grew more than they were built, their molecular structures capable of near-instantaneous reconfiguration and self-repair. Dr. Sarah Nakamura, the chief of technological architect, approached the admiral with her latest diagnostic report. Her team had spent the last 2 decades developing technologies that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Quantum entanglement drives that could traverse impossible distances, adaptive hull materials that could absorb and redirect energy, biological technological interfaces that blurred the line between machine and living organism. The latest simulation shows a 99.7% adaptive response rate, Sarah reported, her holographic display showing complex molecular restructuring patterns. Our ships can now completely reconfigure their internal and external structures within 0.03 seconds of detecting a threat. It's no longer about defense. It's about instantaneous transformation. The Jupiter facility was more than a shipyard. It was a testament to humanity's hidden potential. While other galactic civilizations saw humans as a relatively young species, limited to their solar system, an entirely different reality was taking shape in the electromagnetic storms of the solar system's largest planet. Quantum computing cores integrated biological neural networks harvested from carefully cultivated human volunteers. These were not simple machine intelligences, but hybrid consciousness systems that could think, adapt, and respond with a level of creativity that no algorithmic system could match. Each ship was essentially a living entity, with decision-making capabilities that went far beyond traditional artificial intelligence. Admiral Rodriguez reviewed the latest strategic assessments. The transmission from Epsilon 9 had accelerated their preparation timeline, but it had not caught them unprepared. Humanity had been watching, studying, preparing for a conflict that most believed was nothing more than a theoretical possibility. The shipyards housed 200 primary vessels, each capable of operations that would make most galactic civilizations question the very nature of technological development. Adaptive camouflage systems could make the ships virtually undetectable, while quantum shield technologies could absorb and redirect energy attacks with almost contemptuous ease. Biomechanical integration is at 87%. Sarah continued, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. We've successfully merged quantum computing with organic neural networks. The ships don't just respond to human commands. They anticipate them. They learn. They adapt. Underground research facilities across Earth and its colonies have been working in perfect, invisible synchronization. Quantum communication networks allowed instantaneous sharing of research and development, creating a technological ecosystem that operated with a level of efficiency no external civilization could comprehend. The ships represented more than a military solution. They were a philosophical statement about the nature of technological evolution. Traditional warfare relied on static technologies, fixed weapon systems, predetermined defense mechanisms. These vessels represented something entirely different: living, thinking, adapting entities that could transform themselves faster than any threat could be conceived. Admiral Rodriguez allowed herself a moment of reflection. Humanity had been preparing for this moment for far longer than anyone could imagine. The transmission from Epsilon 9 was not a surprise. It was a confirmation of everything they had anticipated. "Quantum Forge is ready," she said quietly to Dr. Nakamura. "We can launch within 6 standard hours of receiving the final confirmation." The massive shipyard continued its work, electromagnetic storms concealing humanity's most remarkable technological achievement. 200 ships grew, adapted, prepared. A fleet that would redefine the very understanding of technological warfare. Humanity was ready, and no one in the galaxy had any idea. The moment of departure was unlike anything recorded in galactic history. 200 vessels emerged from Jupiter's electromagnetic storms, their forms shifting and rippling like living entities awakening from a profound slumber. Each ship was a marvel of technological complexity that challenged the very fundamental understanding of space travel. Fleet Admiral Marcus Reyes stood on the command deck of the primary vessel, his weathered hands resting lightly on the quantum neural interface. Around him, the ship's internal environment responded to his slightest emotional fluctuation, bulkheads subtly adjusting, environmental systems anticipating needs before they could be verbalized. "Quantum entanglement drive charging," announced Commander Lauren Kim, her voice steady despite the magnitude of their mission. The bridge crew moved with a synchronicity that suggested something more than traditional military training. They were an organic extension of the ship itself, their thoughts and intentions merging with the vessel's adaptive intelligence. The first quantum jump would be the most critical. Traditional faster-than-light travel relied on predictable space-time manipulation. What humanity had developed was something entirely different, a method of transportation that didn't so much travel through space as rewrite the fundamental rules of spatial existence. As the first ship activated its drive, reality itself seemed to ripple. Space folded, twisted, and then resolved in a way that defied conventional understanding. Star systems that should have taken decades to reach were traversed in moments, the very fabric of spacetime bending to the will of technologies that most civilizations would consider impossible. Each vessel in the fleet was more than a weapon. They were living repositories of human potential, with adaptive technologies that could reconfigure themselves faster than any threat could be conceived. Quantum shielding that could absorb and redirect energy attacks, molecular restructuring capabilities that allowed instantaneous transformation, biological technological interfaces that blurred the line between machine and living organism. Tracking multiple quantum signatures, reported the ship's primary navigation system, an artificial intelligence so advanced it was nearly indistinguishable from a living consciousness. Potential swarm detection zones identified and adaptive response protocols are fully online. The fleet's journey was a carefully orchestrated dance of technological marvel. Ships could communicate instantaneously across impossible distances, sharing tactical information and adapting their configurations in microseconds. Where traditional military doctrine spoke of command structures and fixed battle plans, this fleet operated as a single living organism. Admiral Reyes reviewed the mission parameters. The transmission from Epsilon 9 had provided more than just a distress signal. It was a comprehensive analysis of the swarm's technological and biological characteristics. Every piece of data had been integrated into the fleet's adaptive systems, creating a level of preparedness that went far beyond traditional military strategy. Quantum communication arrays picked up increasingly fragmented signals from the distant frontier. Colonies falling, defensive systems collapsing, the systematic elimination of entire civilizations proceeding with terrifying efficiency. But where other species saw hopelessness, humanity saw an opportunity to demonstrate something profound about technological evolution. "We are approximately 6 standard time units from the Epsilon 9 coordinate system," Commander Kim announced. The bridge crew tensed, not out of fear, but with a sense of anticipation. They were not just a rescue mission. They were a statement about the true potential of technological adaptation. The ships continued their impossible journey, moving in ways that would have been considered miraculous by any other civilization. They didn't just travel through space, they rewrote its fundamental rules. Quantum entanglement drives created pathways that defied traditional understanding of distance and time. Deep within each vessel, hybrid neural networks, part biological, part technological, processed information at speeds that would have been considered impossible mere decades ago. These were not simple artificial intelligences, but living technological organisms that could think, adapt, and respond with a level of creativity that challenged the very definition of consciousness. As they approached the frontier regions, the first signs of the swarm became visible. Massive biomechanical constructs that consumed and transformed entire star systems, where other civilizations saw an insurmountable threat. The human fleet saw a complex problem waiting to be solved. Admiral Reyes allowed himself the slightest hint of a smile. Humanity had been preparing for this moment for far longer than anyone could have imagined. And now, they were ready to show the galaxy exactly what that preparation meant. The first moment of contact defied every known principle of interstellar warfare. The swarm's initial attack waves approached with a predatory precision that had decimated countless civilizations. Massive biomechanical constructs, part organic, part technological, unleashed energy weapons that had previously stripped entire planetary systems of their defenses in moments. Commander David Okoye watched from the primary vessel's tactical interface as the incoming attack formations materialized. Thousands of biomechanical units converge, their movement a terrifying symphony of technological consumption. Previous encounters had shown these entities could adapt to defensive systems within seconds, absorbing and repurposing technological infrastructures faster than most species could comprehend. Incoming energy cascade detected, announced the ship's quantum intelligence system. Preliminary analysis suggests total system penetration probability at 99.8% for standard defensive configurations. But humanity was anything but standard. The first energy wave struck the human fleet and simply disappeared. Quantum shielding didn't just deflect the attack. It absorbed the entire energy spectrum, breaking down the molecular structure of the incoming assault at a fundamental level. Where other civilizations would have been instantly vaporized, the human ships remained not just intact, but completely unaffected. The swarm's initial assault force hesitated, a remarkable display of computational recalculation. Their tactical algorithms couldn't process the impossibility of a defense that completely negated their most devastating attack methods. Adaptive response protocol initiated. The ship's neural network reported. The vessels began to change, their molecular structures shifting in ways that defied conventional understanding of material science. Hull configurations transformed, creating complex geometric patterns that seemed to exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. Commander Okoye observed the tactical display with a calm that would have been impossible for most military leaders. The human fleet wasn't just defending. They were actively analyzing, learning, preparing to turn the swarm's own technologies against them. Quantum communication arrays began to decode the swarm's communication protocols in real time. Where previous encounters had shown these entities as unstoppable technological predators, the human fleet saw them as a complex system waiting to be understood and ultimately neutralized. Energy redirection at 97% efficiency, reported the tactical systems. The swarm's attacks weren't just being blocked, they were being absorbed, analyzed, and transformed into additional defensive and offensive capabilities. Biomechanical constructs that had consumed entire civilizations suddenly found themselves facing an opponent that operated on an entirely different technological paradigm. The human ships didn't just resist, they evolved with each microsecond of contact, their adaptive technologies creating defensive and offensive capabilities faster than the swarm could comprehend. Entire attack formations began to break down. The swarm's primary tactical weakness had always been its reliance on predictive algorithms and rapid technological absorption. But the human vessels presented something entirely incomprehensible, a technological ecosystem that could not be predicted, absorbed, or defeated through traditional computational methods. Initiating comprehensive technological analysis, the ship's neural network continued. Swarm communication protocols being decoded, defensive systems being reverse-engineered. What had begun as an attack was rapidly transforming into something else entirely. The swarm found itself not just resisted, but studied. Every attack became a source of additional information. Every energy burst a means of further understanding the human technological approach. Commander Okoye knew this was more than a battle. This was a fundamental demonstration of humanity's true technological potential. Where other civilizations had seen humans as a young, relatively primitive species, the truth was far more complex. The first wave of swarm attack formations began to disintegrate, not through traditional destruction, but through a complete computational breakdown. Their own technologies were being turned against them, their communication networks unraveled by adaptive quantum decryption systems that operated on principles the swarm had never encountered. Total tactical analysis complete, the ship's neural network announced. Swarm attack formations neutralized. Technological absorption protocols at maximum efficiency. What had seemed like an impossible confrontation was rapidly becoming a comprehensive technological demonstration. The human fleet wasn't just defending. They were fundamentally rewriting the understanding of technological warfare. The swarm had believed they were the ultimate technological predators. They were about to learn how wrong they had been. The defensive perimeter of Epsilon 9 had long since crumbled, reduced to scattered debris and ionized fragments that drifted listlessly through the star system. Commander Helena Werner watched from the last remaining observation post, her hands trembling slightly as the human fleet materialized from quantum space. It wasn't just an arrival. It was a fundamental transformation of reality. The human vessels moved with a fluidity that defied every known principle of space combat. Where traditional military doctrine spoke of rigid formations and predetermined attack patterns, these ships seemed to flow like living water, anticipating threats before they could even be conceived. Quantum adaptive response at maximum efficiency, reported her primary communication officer. The words seemed inadequate to describe what was happening before their eyes. The swarm's attack formations, which had systematically consumed entire civilizations, suddenly found themselves confronted with an opponent that operated on an entirely different level of technological understanding. Each human ship seemed to be simultaneously a weapon, a defensive system, and a learning entity. Tactical displays showed something unprecedented. The human vessels weren't just defending. They were actively rewriting the fundamental computational language of the swarm's attack protocols. Where previous encounters had shown these biomechanical entities as unstoppable, the human fleet demonstrated a level of adaptive intelligence that seemed to border on the impossible. Molecular restructuring happened in microseconds. Ships would momentarily shift into configurations that seemed to exist in multiple dimensional states, absorbing incoming energy attacks and transforming them into defensive and offensive capabilities faster than any computational system could track. They're not just fighting, Helena muttered to herself. They're solving a complex problem in real time. The survivors of Epsilon 9 watched in a mixture of terror and awe. These weren't simply advanced warships. They were living technological organisms that challenged every understanding of warfare, intelligence, and technological adaptation. Swarm attack waves that had previously stripped entire star systems of their defenses now found themselves systematically dismantled, not through brute force, but through a comprehensive understanding and immediate neutralization of their technological infrastructure. Communication networks collapsed. Biomechanical constructs that had consumed countless civilizations found themselves completely unable to predict or counter the human fleet's approach. It was as if the very laws of technological engagement were being rewritten in real time. Tactical analysis suggests complete system breakdown, the communication officer reported, his voice barely above a whisper. The swarm's computational systems are experiencing total network failure. Helena understood what was happening on a deeper level. This wasn't just a military engagement. It was a fundamental demonstration of technological philosophy. Where the swarm saw conquest through consumption, the human fleet represented something entirely different. A technological ecosystem that could learn, adapt, and transform with impossible speed. Quantum communication arrays began to decode and analyze the swarm's entire technological infrastructure. What had seemed like an impenetrable system of technological consumption was rapidly being reduced to its fundamental components, understood, and neutralized. The human ships moved with an almost organic creativity. Attack formations would spontaneously reconfigure, defensive systems would anticipate threats before they could be conceived, and entire computational networks would be dismantled and understood in moments. Complete tactical analysis in progress, the ship's neural network continued. Swarm technological infrastructure being comprehensively decoded. Survivors from multiple civilizations watched in disbelief. The swarm, an entity that had been considered an unstoppable force of technological consumption, was being systematically taken apart, not through overwhelming force, but through a level of adaptive intelligence that seemed to redefine the very understanding of technological warfare. The turning point wasn't a moment of destruction. It was a moment of comprehensive understanding. As the human fleet continued its engagement, it became clear that this was more than a battle. This was a fundamental demonstration of humanity's true potential, a technological approach that saw conflict not as a problem of force, but as a complex system waiting to be understood and ultimately resolved. The swarm had believed they were the ultimate technological predators. They were about to learn how profoundly wrong they had been. The transformation began almost imperceptibly. Where other civilizations would have seen total destruction, the human fleet initiated a process that could only be described as technological resurrection. Swarm vessels, once instruments of ruthless consumption, began to change at a molecular level, their biomechanical structures being systematically rewritten by adaptive quantum technologies. Commander Elena Rodriguez watched from the primary vessel's strategic interface as entire enemy fleets underwent a metamorphosis that defied every known principle of technological warfare. It wasn't just neutralization. It was complete systemic reconstruction. Technological convergent protocols at 67% efficiency reported the ship's quantum neural network. Biomechanical structures being restructured at the quantum level. The process was horrifyingly beautiful. Swarm vessels that had once been instruments of total destruction began to break down, their complex technological infrastructures being carefully dismantled and repurposed. Molecular-level adaptive technologies worked with a precision that suggested something more than simple engineering. It was closer to a form of technological healing. Survivors from multiple civilizations watched in stunned silence. The human fleet wasn't just defeating the swarm, they were fundamentally transforming it. Where other species would have sought total destruction, humanity pursued a more complex solution that challenged every understanding of technological conflict. Quantum communication arrays began to decode and reconstruct the swarm's entire technological ecosystem. Complex communication networks that had been used for systematic destruction were carefully unraveled, analyzed, and then rebuilt into something entirely different. It was as if the human fleet was performing a kind of technological surgery on an entire civilization. Neural network integration at 82%. The tactical systems continued. Biomechanical communication protocols being comprehensively restructured. The transformation went beyond simple technological conversion. The human ships were actively rewriting the fundamental computational language of the swarm. What had been a system of pure consumption was being transformed into something more, a potential technological ecosystem that could be integrated rather than destroyed. Dr. Marcus Chen, the xenohistorian who had first decoded the original transmission, would have been fascinated. This was more than military engagement. It was a fundamental reimagining of technological conflict. Entire star systems began to change. Planets that had been reduced to barren husks by the swarm's systematic consumption started to show signs of molecular reconstruction. Adaptive technologies worked to restore ecological systems, to rebuild technological infrastructures that had been completely destroyed. Planetary restoration protocols initiated, the ship's neural network announced. Comprehensive ecological rehabilitation in progress. The survivors watched in a mixture of terror and hope. The human fleet moved through the star system with a precision that suggested something more than military strategy. It was a comprehensive approach to technological and ecological restoration that challenged every previous understanding of interstellar conflict. Swarm vessels that had once been instruments of total destruction were carefully taken apart, their molecular structures analyzed and then reconstructed. It was as if the human fleet was teaching an entire technological civilization, an entirely new way of existing. Complete tactical analysis and reconstruction at 91%. The systems continued. Technological ecosystem being comprehensively redesigned. The scale of the operation was almost incomprehensible. Where other civilizations would have sought total destruction, the human fleet pursued a more complex solution. They weren't just defeating the swarm, they were fundamentally transforming it, showing a level of technological and philosophical sophistication that went far beyond traditional concepts of warfare. Communication networks that had once been used for systematic destruction were carefully unraveled, analyzed, and then rebuilt. The swarm's entire technological infrastructure was being reimagined, transformed from a system of pure consumption into something potentially cooperative. As the reconstruction continued, it became clear that this was more than a military engagement. This was a fundamental demonstration of humanity's approach to technological and ecological challenges. Where other species saw only conflict, humanity saw an opportunity for comprehensive transformation. The final tactical report came through with a clarity that seemed to capture the entire mission's philosophy. Technological conversion complete. Systemic reconstruction at maximum efficiency. Ecological restoration protocols fully engaged. The human fleet had done more than rescue a dying civilization. They had demonstrated a completely new approach to technological conflict, one that saw potential where others saw only destruction. The swarm had entered this engagement as a system of total consumption. They would emerge as something entirely different. The diplomatic conference convened in the neutral orbital station above New Geneva represented more than a simple meeting. It was a fundamental restructuring of galactic political understanding. Representatives from over 300 civilizations gathered, their collective gaze fixed on the human delegation with a mixture of fear, respect, and profound uncertainty. Dr. Marcus Chen stood at the primary presentation interface, his analysis of the recent conflict transforming from a historical report into a comprehensive reimagining of technological and diplomatic engagement. The holographic displays behind him showcased the extraordinary transformation of the swarm, from a system of total technological consumption to a potentially cooperative ecosystem. What we witnessed was not a traditional military intervention, Chen explained, his voice calm and methodical. It was a comprehensive demonstration of technological diplomacy that challenges every existing paradigm of interstellar conflict. The gathered representatives shifted uncomfortably. Humanity had done more than defeat a technological threat. They had fundamentally reimagined the very concept of technological conflict. Admiral Elena Rodriguez stood beside Chen, her presence a silent testament to the extraordinary capabilities they had demonstrated. The human fleet had not just saved multiple civilizations, they had shown a level of technological and philosophical sophistication that rewrote fundamental understanding of interstellar engagement. Quantum communication arrays translated Chen's presentation in real time, allowing representatives to understand the nuanced approach humanity had taken. The transformation of the swarm wasn't just a military victory. It was a comprehensive technological rehabilitation that suggested an entirely new approach to interstellar challenges. The swarm was not an enemy to be destroyed, Chen continued, but a complex technological ecosystem waiting to be understood and restructured. Diplomatic representatives from the Zarn Confederation, the primary survivors of the Epsilon 9 colony, provided first-hand testimony. They described how the human fleet had not just rescued them, but had actively worked to restore their technological and ecological infrastructure. The holographic displays showed before and after images of star systems that had been completely consumed by the swarm. Where there had been total destruction, there was now the beginning of comprehensive ecological and technological restoration. Planetary systems were being rebuilt, technological infrastructures reconstructed, entire civilizations brought back from the brink of total extinction. "We are presenting a new model of interstellar engagement," Admiral Rodriguez added, her words carefully chosen. "One that sees potential where others see only threat. One that understands that technological challenges are not problems to be eliminated, but complex systems to be understood and transformed." The diplomatic implications were profound. Humanity had demonstrated a level of technological capability that went far beyond military might. They had shown an approach to conflict that was fundamentally different from any previously known galactic civilization. Representatives from multiple star systems began to understand the true nature of what had occurred. This was more than a military victory. This was a fundamental reimagining of technological and diplomatic engagement. Dr. Chen's presentation continued, detailing the comprehensive analysis of the swarm's technological infrastructure. The human fleet had not just defeated a threat, they had transformed an entire technological ecosystem, showing a level of understanding that suggested capabilities far beyond traditional military or technological approaches. "We are proposing a new framework of interstellar engagement," Chen explained. "One that sees technological challenges as opportunities for comprehensive understanding and transformation." The gathered representatives listened in stunned silence. Humanity was proposing nothing less than a complete restructuring of how civilizations might approach technological and ecological challenges. Quantum communication networks began to process the implications. The human approach suggested a level of technological and philosophical sophistication that challenged every existing paradigm of interstellar conflict. As the conference progressed, it became clear that something extraordinary had occurred. Humanity had not just saved multiple civilizations from total destruction. They had demonstrated a completely new approach to technological and diplomatic engagement, one that saw potential where others saw only threat. The final resolution was unprecedented. Multiple civilizations began to adopt elements of the human approach, a comprehensive, adaptive strategy that saw technological challenges as opportunities for understanding and transformation. The swarm, once a system of total technological consumption, was being reimagined as a potential cooperative ecosystem. Humanity had done more than win a conflict. They had fundamentally changed the understanding of what was possible in interstellar engagement. The galaxy would never be the same.